The narrative of Vatican II was created by radical traditionalists who wanted to stop Pope John XXIII's progressive movements towards a new and modernized way of practicing in the Church. On January 25, 1959, Pope John XXIII called for the Second Ecumenical Vatican Council. The Vatican Council spearheaded the change in the Church and what they would be doing to create a new and modernized way of practice. Pre-Vatican II Mass was completely in Latin, and the priests faced the altar so that the laity could not see their faces. Sometimes they even stood behind a curtain. No eye contact was made, and no engagement from the community was done. Pope John, however, wanted to change this. He wanted to make the Mass more accessible for the everyday layperson. He wanted the Mass to go back to the vernacular so that everyone can understand it and be participant in the Mass. This, however, upset radical traditionalists who thought that by changing the ways of the Mass, the dogmas or original beliefs of the Catholic Church would be affected. This is where we see Kevin Brunel's argument in The Trouble with Amnesia come to a front. Brunel's idea of collective memory and a whole group forgetting something just to make their narrative sound better applies to this. What the traditionalists did is completely forget the main goals of Pope John XXIII. Instead, they said that he was trying to change the initial doctrines of the Church that would reroute the entire Roman Catholic faith completely. Brunel says that collective memory is an underappreciated yet fundamental component of our political lives. A nation without a memory does not exist at all. Page 236 through 237. This idea of the memory as a fundamental construct in creating the narrative is what the traditionalists used to their advantage. Knowing that many of the progressives who supported the shift to Vatican II documents and the reform of the Church were young and not old enough to articulate pre-Vatican II, traditionalists could create any narrative about the past they so intended. What traditionalists did not keep in mind when creating this narrative was that the actual physical documents of Vatican II were out. Anyone in the public can see them, and if they just looked at them, they could see that Pope John, in fact, did not change any of the original doctrines. All he did was make the Mass more accessible and more modern in the everyday world. The Roman Catholic Church is a powerful institution on its own, making the narrative it presents extremely important and influential on society. Michelle Cliff's, author of History as Fiction, Fiction as History, describes the relationship that the fictional narrative can play in shaping our nation's history. If we think about this sentiment in terms of power, creating history is like a source of dominance. Being able to create a narrative that will shape how the entire world views your institution is an extremely powerful position to be in. Cliff offers the question, how do we capture the history that remains only to be imagined? Cliff answers, I attempt to describe what has not been described. I try to build a story on the most delicate of remains. Page 2. Looking back on Pope John XXIII, one can argue that he was a maverick. He knew that change was coming. He knew the Church needed to be poised to handle the changes by remaining faithful and devout to the core beliefs of the Roman Catholic Church. The changes implemented by Vatican II were set in place to retain the core beliefs in a more modern world. It is interesting that to this day, traditionalists are still blinded with the type of amnesia symptoms described by Brunel. This phenomenon has become a significant part of how many historical events have been taught and impressed into our minds. Thank you.